strategy-wise, okay, Trump, DeSantis. So for you, you're thinking there's a part of this that there is weaponizing of the justice system against the former president.
100%.
Perfect. Then
that's been a while. That goes back to when they fixed the Hillary Clinton case.
Then I have a question for you, because I think you're partially responsible. And so here's where I'm going with this, and let's see what direction you're going to take this. So we pulled up 5 historical facts about weaponization federal government. Now, of course, we can go back to McCarthyism, where they, communism, they're going against that 40s, 50s. We've all know about that one. Then you have the COINTELPRO from 1956 to 71. The FBI ran a covert operation known as COINTELPRO, which aimed to disrupt and discredit various political groups, including civil rights activists, this is the Malcolm X, this is the Martin Luther King. Then you have the war on drugs, 80s and 90s. They launched this. That led to a sharp increase in the number of people incarcerated for drug offenses. Then we have the Patriot Act. And prior to that, we have the RICO, which, the gentleman Blakey, who was I think, Notre Dame professor in 1970, he came up with that. And then you guys kind of found a way on how to go after the mob. And then, boom, you took down, pretty much cleaned up the streets of New York with the mob. Everybody was trying to figure out a way to do it. You were the only one that ended up being successful. You got the Patriot Act in 2001. Which the government passed this, which explained the government's ability to surveil and investigate suspected terrorists. Critics argue that the laws has been used to infringe on the civil liberties of innocent Americans, that it has been used to target individuals and organizations based on their political views rather than their actual links to terrorism. And then you have the Mueller investigation, which happened in 2017. So partially, when you're doing this at the beginning, I'm assuming, this is purely speculating, I'm assuming you're like, hey guys, we got to take down the mob and clean up the streets of New York. We got to do it, no problem. Fantastic. How are we going to do it? This guy comes in from Notre Dame. Let me tell you, this is one thing that we came up with, the racketeering, the RICO Act, all this other stuff. Let's do it. Then the government said, wow, what a great weapon to use against the people. And then that got stronger and more creative. And then some evil leaders got their hands on it, saying, we can silence people. How awesome was this? So even though originally it was used to take the bad people out, now it's being used to hurt good and innocent people. Going back, would you say partially the RICO, some of these things you guys did, do you regret any of it, making it as strong as it ended up being, that we're experiencing what we're experiencing today?
Well, first of all, I don't know if all of them are related, the same thing. The difference between then and now is every one of those began as a legitimate issue involving our national security, our safety. They weren't, nobody passed a Patriot Act to go after innocent people. I mean, what's going on right now was designed for one purpose and one purpose alone, for the ruling party to take out the opposition party. It had no legitimate purpose at all. The weaponization of the Justice Department was not to go after mafia guys, terrorists, people who kill you. The weaponization of the Justice Department was to destroy really any opposition to the regime. Secondly, any law can be misused. You can misuse a minor misdemeanor and weaponize it for filing false entries in your books. So you're always subject to that. You're subject, the laws are there. It's like saying the Soviet Union had a constitution. The Red China has a constitution with more rights than our Bill of Rights, considerably more. But it doesn't mean anything. So I don't know that the government, even being excessive in pursuing bad guys, and maybe even being a little bit overzealous in doing that, I don't think that leads to what is now typical of a totalitarian regime, which is the ruling party using the criminal process to go after the opposition party. I think that's a totally different thing, and I think it developed in a different way. I think it developed because of the long-term influence of the Communist Party on the Democratic Party. And I think they've basically taken over. I think this is a well-thought-out plot that goes back at least 20 or 30 years to destroy our government. And I think that's why Soros is funding it. Why does Soros pay for 40 or 50 DAs all over the country to basically destroy these cities? because Soros wants our government to fall. He wants a one-world government. He probably wants to run the one-world government, or at least be the head of the Department of the Treasury, so he can steal from it. And so, no, I don't regret the RICO statute. I think the RICO statute, it would be excellent to use, for example, against a Biden crime family. It would be apply exactly. The whole idea of the Racketeering Act is you just can't put them in jail. You got to take their property away. Because if you just keep putting the mafia in jail, some other mafia guy comes along and takes over the $5 billion enterprise and it becomes $6 billion. And there was a recognition by Professor Blakey, who I knew very, very well, that the only way we're going to crush the mafia is to take their empire away. For example, one of the cases that isn't mentioned that I did was I took the Teamsters Union away from the mob, which meant taking Las Vegas away from the mob, because they controlled Las Vegas to the Central States Pension Fund of the Teamsters Union. You thought it was a Central States Pension Fund money. It was the mafia money that was being laundered for 30 years. So I don't regret it. What I do regret is the wrong people getting in government and then being able to use any of these laws.
But we can't. But we know the wrong people are eventually going to be in power, right? So certain policies could work for good people because a good person may not abuse the power that they have, but you have to be thinking about policies to create that an evil guy doesn't come and say, I'm going to abuse my power. So, you know, I understand what you're saying. It was built for the good guy to, you know, find and catch the bad guy. But what if the bad guy is now the leader that's going after the good guy? So what could we have done differently? The only reason I'm asking this question is because we got now this FedNow app coming out. We got CBDC coming out. We got this Restrict Act coming out that they're saying, oh, we're going to take down TikTok. And Charlie Kirk made a very good point the other day, the fact that they're using this to say they want to silence Dave Rubin. Dave, we're sorry. We don't like the message you got. We got to go after him. Right. So only thing I'm asking is, I'm not a lawyer. I didn't work in the New York, you know, district as an attorney. You've been around the block. For the next people, the next Giuliani, the next guy that's going to have that kind of a power, when they're writing these acts up, should they do it or don't even do it? Don't even go there. But if they do it, how do you write it to make sure a bad guy cannot weaponize it?
Bad guys can weaponize anything. They can weaponize the simplest law or a complex law. And you can't deprive yourself of laws that are going to protect you against murderers, rapists, terrorists. You can't pass a law that can't be misused by a bad guy if a bad guy gets into power. This is not a question of the laws that we passed. It's a question of the people that we voted for. Like the people of Chicago, there's got to be something wrong with them voting for the person they voted for.
Lori Lightfoot.
The new one. He's talking about Johnson.
Yeah,
there's got to be something wrong with them. They're brainwashed. This is a development that happened within politics rather than within the legal system. Because even if we didn't have these laws, and most of these laws weren't even used by the Democrats in weaponizing the Justice Department. They're much simpler laws that they used, or they make things up. The indictment of Trump is a non-existent indictment. It's null and void. It doesn't charge a crime. It charges a crime without explaining the crime, which would lead to the dismissal of any other indictment. The judge should have thrown it out as null and void. I don't know why his lawyers didn't get up and refuse to plead to it. If I represented him, he never would have pled to that indictment. I would have said, this is not an indictment. It says here, this was in pursuance of a crime. What would you like me to do? Guess which one of the 1,000 New York crimes it is? Would you give me a hint at least? What am I pleading to? If you read the indictment, you don't know what you're pleading to. He's pleading, if you pled guilty, you wouldn't know what you pled guilty to. So we can't do away with indictments. What we got to do is do away with corrupt district attorneys like Alvin Bragg. I mean, that's the problem.
Dave, what do you think?
Well, let me add something to slightly defend the mayor from the time that he was in office and beforehand when he was dealing with the mafia and all of this stuff when these laws were put into place. You know, we used to have Democrats and Republicans that disagreed on certain issues, meaning taxation, certain things related to crime. certain things related to abortion, et cetera, et cetera. But there wasn't one party that in essence was solely existing to pretty much destroy America as we know it and become completely lawless and not know the difference between boys and girls and want neo-racism taught in the schools and not believe that jailing criminals is correct, et cetera, et cetera. We now have one party like that. So I think what's happening now, you got a guy like Alvin Bragg, who we were discussing it at dinner. The guy does not charge you with the crime if you jump the turnstile in New York City. So think what you're doing. You're doing two things when you do that. First off, you're incentivizing people for bad behavior, right? You're telling them, go ahead and jump the turnstile, do whatever you want. And you're also telling the law-abiding person in New York City, you're a sucker, man. You're paying your $2.50 or $2.75, whatever it is on the subway now, while these kids are just jumping over. They will not prosecute for prostitution. The craziest one that they will not prosecute for is avoiding arrest. So you are allowed to literally fight the cop as he's trying to arrest you, and you will not be penalized for that. So I think what's happened here, there's a little asymmetry. Most of us, especially if you live in a free state, a law and order state like Florida, where, by the way, we are now getting all of the good cops. You know that there were thousands and thousands of incredible members of the New York Police Department who are now moving down here. DeSantis is giving them bonuses, and we're becoming stronger, and they're becoming weaker. The difference is that when you have one side that is completely unhinged related to law and reality, there is no law that you can set up that will not be abused. So I'm
going to still push back if you're okay with that, guys.
Yeah.
And I want both of you guys to try to rip apart my argument, and I'm very comfortable with that. Okay. So you have kids, you have a family, you're doing estate planning, you're doing living trusts, okay? And you would like to pass down your wealth to your kids, but you would like them to manage the wealth in a responsible way so it can go to your grandkids and great-grandkids and stay within the family, right? So when you study generational wealth and you go to Rothschild, you go to Rockefellers, you go to Vanderbilts, you go to Medici family, all of these guys, you will see Vanderbilts were so flippin' wealthy, but his living trust sucked. Yeah, I think he had like 11 kids. Within one generation or two, boom, all the money was gone. Medici's kept it in the family, I think 7 generations. Rockefellers kept it in the family 3 generations. I believe the way we create the laws, we can say, let's not vote bad people in here, but okay, can you be a great parent and have one of your kids that meets a teacher at UC Berkeley and flips them, and all of a sudden they become a person that cannot agree with anything you're saying, or you're evil parent and all this other stuff, and if you give that guy the money, he's going to go give the money to us. So all I'm saying is we can't control evil people. We can't control people that get influenced to do dumb things, okay? We cannot control it. Even great parents could have bad kids. All I'm saying is it's easy for us to put it all on Alvin Bragg's, but he was able to do this because certain things in the past, you can go and say, well, in this case, here's what it is. So guess what? The way they took this guy down, let's just go and target Donald Trump. The way they took this guy down, all I'm saying is, while we're going through a big decision right now with this Restrict Act, you're not going to be affected by it. You and I will be affected by it, but our kids will be affected by it because they're going to be the ones that's going to be using social media a lot longer than we are. Yeah. So we can sit here and be like, well, it's not really that. We just got to make sure we vote the right people in. If it's all about just voting the right people in, why are so many immigrants in America? They escape that. I think there's a part of it. All I'm asking is, Mayor, from you, and I want to transition to another topic. What can we learn from the way we wrote these things up to not do it again?
Well, maybe I didn't make it. I didn't point out this other part of it. I'm not saying there aren't very bad laws, and that laws are passed that infringe human rights, civil rights, are too intrusive, are unwise, can actually be more easily abused. That all happens, and we shouldn't do that now or before or later. I just don't think there's the connection between that and what you're saying. I don't think Alvin Bragg exists because let's say you believe that the Patriot Act was overzealous, intruded too much into privacy, and it might very well, I might agree with you on some of that. I don't think that's the reason we are where we are today. I think independently we should fix it, and that's another problem that we have. And I think the Restrict Act, I think it would be a very bad law. And it would be a particularly bad law because our government has become more corrupt. So it would be in the hands of corrupt people. But it shouldn't even be in the hands of honest people. And I think the way I think the inheritance tax is inherently inequitable, unfair, capitalism, anti-incentive to develop wealth, anti-human nature. One of the reasons you work hard is for your family. And then that's a contribution to everyone, because you're working hard. Your main objective is your family, but you're helping society in doing that. And knowing that your wealth is going to get cut in half or more, that's going to change. It's going to change that. And then people are also going to look for ways to break the law. These intrusive laws lead to a lot of, like, if you have taxes that are too high, people find ways to avoid it, and then people find ways to evade it. So I think, Patrick, there are two different problems that you're talking about, and I think this problem emerges from our politics, our morality or lack thereof, and I do think, and I know it sounds like this is a conspiracy theory that I'm asserting, but I am. It is a conspiracy. I think that China has a lot to do with it. I think China has corrupted many of these people who are involved in these unbelievably illegal applications of the law. If Biden isn't corrupted by China, it would be totally ridiculous. The guy got $31 million plus in the last 6 years from China, and he's taken actions for China that only could be taken by somebody that seems to favor China over the United States. He gives up an air base 400 miles from China. That's insane. In an era in which we may be in a war involving missiles and airplanes, being 400 miles from China is an unbelievable strategic advantage given away by our president for nothing in return. Is it a coincidence that the man who did it, family, got $31 million from China in the last 6 years? No, it's not a coincidence. You have to be ridiculous to think it's a coincidence. He refuses to pursue China, and they're the cause of COVID. He told us that China really is a friend, ultimately a friend. He's never said a harsh word about China. And they're day by day, they're gaining an advantage over us, if they're not already having an advantage that's going to take them to their goal of being the dominant nation on the earth by 2048. I think that they'll get there faster.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.